Hello, welcome back to the workshop on a cold and miserable November day. In the last episode, you'll see me chop these off the chassis of the Land Rover. These are of course the front dumbirons, and they came off the front of the chassis where their primary job is to hold the front of the road spring on. So on the old Land Rovers you've got a leaf spring on the front there, and that's what that's for. I said at the time I'd have to have a look at these and decide what to do about them. Well, I've had a good look at them. Yeah, this is the worst one by a long way. After careful inspection then, I've decided they are beyond economical repair, but I'm going to have a go anyway. I feel a bit bad about buying new chassis bits to replace the damaged outriggers there, so I'm going to make up for it by fixing up these ones instead of buying new dumbirons or a new front end or whatever. Plus I have read there's some concern with the replacement pattern parts for the front bits of the chassis on whether they're dimensionally accurate or not. So I thought I'd sidestep that issue by restoring these, which I know are not dimensionally accurate. Particularly this one. This is the one that you might remember from Mark's tale. He drove into a wall, and there's actually a seam going all the way around this one where it was pretty much sheared off. Some of the metal, most of the metal is actually fine. It just needs bringing back to its correct shape. All this patchwork chopping off, and then some rebuilding. Most of the rot, as you'd expect, is on the bottom plate here, where the water would obviously collect more. So to clean it up, I'm going to blast it. Now I've got two outdoor blasting setups. I've got this little thing here. So this is just a tub that you fill up with grit, and you feed it air in here, and it's just like a spray gun in that the air flows through a venturi here, and the venturi just means a narrowing. Basically it's a narrowing of the chamber, which then induces suction in this bit, in this tube, and that drags some grit up, and then you get an air and grit mixture spraying out of here. Now, these things cost about 20 quid, and they kind of work. It has its place. Not terribly effective. I also have another shot blasting setup, which is the opposite end of the spectrum, and that's a very effective bit of kit, and that's what I'll be using to do the main chassis. It's definitely not for everyday use. And neither of those things are any use at all on a day like this. So I'll show you, let me show you outside. This is the view outside the workshop today. You can see that the sky is grey and murky and horrible. It's drizzling a little bit. And this is late morning. On a day like this, which is it's not uncommon in winter, this is what many of the days would be like, is just grey and horrible and murky and damp overall. There's just no real point blasting outside. So with that in mind, I invested in a blasting cabinet. Now of course, you're thinking, why didn't I build my own blasting cabinet? And it's one of those things I've had in mind to make for just so many years. The thing is, this project is taking ages as it is. I feel all my projects are proceeding at such a slow rate. I thought, no, I'm not going to make one from scratch. What I'll do is buy a cheap one, and if needs be, I'll modify it and make it good. So with that in mind, I went onto eBay, and there's a whole load of them there. The one I went for is the 220 litre model. So that's it's sort of the smaller end of the ones that are freestanding. And the one I bought has got double doors on it, and I paid about, well, by the time it was delivered on a pallet, it was knocking on for 300 quid. Now you can get them for about 210, But when I looked at people unboxing those ones, it was just flat packed and they had to build the whole thing, and that looked like it took hours and hours, and I thought if I'm going to build the whole thing I might as well just do it from scratch anyway. So I thought it was well worth paying a bit extra for one that's pretty much assembled. All I had to do was get it out of the box, build up the legs and just finish it off basically, and I found that to be acceptable. So for me that was worth the extra money. Let's go and check it out. I've told you all this in advance because when we get there it's going to be quite noisy. So the blasting cabinet now lives with the generator, which made sense to me because that's now where the compressors live as well, and it means that it's next to the air supply. It's also the driest place I could think of at the moment because the generator room is warm because it has a generator in it, and it's dry because it has a huge extraction fan blasting air for it all the time. Let's go and have a look. That's the blasting cabinet there. There's a ton of grit which I'll use when I actually get around to blasting the chassis. And then there's two generators, one of which you can probably hear is on now. Oh, we'll have a quick closer look, and then I'll fire it up, and that dumb iron will actually be the first thing that I blast. Let's get back in the workshop. So you can hopefully see there how the operation of that blasting cabinet is pretty much the same as this cheapie here. I mean, the gun is almost identical actually. So you can see that I'm not blasting with sand, and I'm not even blasting with glass grit. All those bags, that's glass grit, which I'm going to use on the chassis. At the moment, in that blasting cabinet, and in here actually, is this stuff. This is probably iron silica, I think. It's either iron silica or copper slag. The superfine, the J-Blast superfine can be either. Either way, it's a byproduct of smelting, basically. It's just a chemically inert version of rust, I suppose. Anyway, these it's considered expendable abrasive because these little particles, which are quite like sand, are actually quite spiky. And so when they hit something, when they're fired out and hit something, they'll take off the paint and the rust and everything like that. Once they've been recycled a couple of times, they're much less effective. Some blasting abrasives keep their hard edges a lot better than this stuff. So you've probably heard that using sand in a sandblaster is a bad thing, or even that it's illegal. And that's interesting. The legality is interesting on it. So back in the 60s, I think it was, it was banned for using sand for sandblasting articles, but not structures. So in practice, that means you're not allowed to sandblast, say, a car, but you can sandblast a bridge or a building or a cellar, or anything like that. So it is still kind of legal in some circumstances to use sand. What is much less well known is it's quite ineffective. So I've used sand to blast paving slabs because it was a cleaner process than this stuff, which back in those days you couldn't really get the glass grit. So I was using this black stuff here for doing ironwork, which it's really good at, but for doing stonework it tended to darken it too much. So I used sand on that, and what I discovered is that sand is about half as effective as this stuff. The reality is, when you're blasting, especially when you're wearing the whole spacesuit thing, and this is what I have to wear when I'm using the big sandblaster. This is a protective helmet, there's like 3 layers in there, and then it's air fed as well with pure air, or purified air rather. When you're wearing all that get up, you just want to get the job over with as quickly and efficiently as possible. So if it's the choice between using this stuff or something that's half as effective, it's quite a simple choice really. And yes, there are health implications with using sand for sandblasting. Sand will disintegrate, and if you breathe in disintegrated sand, you can get silicosis. Interestingly, the glass grit that I'm going to use is less dangerous in that regard. Although you still don't want to breathe it in. Okay, well I'm going to grab some ear defenders and let's go and try out that camera. And this will be the first thing I've tried blasting in there, so you'll be experiencing with me. First go, I'm quite happy with that. My intention then with the shot blasting was to reveal any more corrosion apart from the obvious stuff that I'd already found with the needle gun, and show me the structure of this so I can dismantle it, because what I want to do is replace this bottom part of the chassis box section, and there's a little hole there, which is front bit's not much cop. And these holes are where the bumper bolts on, and I think they're supposed to be round rather than whatever shape that is. And they have these crush tubes inside so that when you do up the bumper bolts it doesn't squeeze this square bit down. They'll probably need something doing to them. Well, actually they don't look too bad. What I'm going to do then is cut some bits off of this one, and then I'm going to use this side, which is relatively undamaged apart from some corrosion on it, as a pattern to rebuild this side, which is where it's actually been, well, almost broken in two and then rebuilt again. First impressions with the blasting cabinet then, it was fine. Oh, one thing I was going to say, the reason I'm using this black grip, this the super, what's it called, J-Blast Superfine, it's just because I found a bag of it. It's simple as that. Once that bag's used up, once the grit's no longer effective, I'll get rid of that and I'll be using the glass grit that I'll be using in the other blasters as well. It's just that I found a bag. That bag's probably about 10 years old. So one thing that became immediately apparent was that the big compressor, even that big compressor, not quite man enough to keep up with a blaster if you're doing it continuously. So I was having to stop every few minutes or so and let the pressure build up again, because it's only really effective around about 100 psi. Once the pressure starts dropping below that, it's not really worth carrying on with it. It's just the grit's not coming out fast enough. If I wanted to do continuous blasting, I'm going to have to use both of those compressors there together, and that should probably just about keep up. Yeah, it's doing the job. So those cheap blasting cabinets, if you look on YouTube, there's loads of people have done videos about modifications that you can do to them to make them better. Interestingly, on that cabinet, some of those improvements have already been done. So the light, for instance, is really good in there. It's much better than the old fluorescent lights that they seemed to come with a few years ago. The pickup tube has the modification suggested already, but I might take it from inside the cabinet and mount it underneath the cabinet. That might be slightly more effective. Other than that, yeah, it's doing what I expected, so I don't really feel the need to pull it apart just yet. It's going to be okay for doing this. Added bonus on this one, and I think this is the first time I've ever seen the chassis number, the actual chassis number on the chassis of a Land Rover. The first thing I'm going to do is take off the steering damper bracket, and then I'm going to have a good look at it, see what's what. You can see one of the reasons I wanted to get it off is all this rust was trapped underneath. Again, that's capillary action there, where it's just welded down here and it can draw in moisture from the top and the bottom. A little bit flaky. Look at that tear. That's those two bits, the original chassis. There's a substantial repair plate underneath. Of course, the trouble is that this metal is much thicker than the chassis metal, so it's going to be the wall of the chassis that's going to give first. So there'll be some distortion to fix. Now, just wondering, those inaccessible welds which are right down there, if I can release all the rest of the welding, I might be able to just leave it off. That's the bit I'm going to keep. And there we have it then. One side, the other side. All the scrap. Believe it or not, I'm quite happy with with that. There was nothing unexpected there, and I feel that's progress. I'm going to go back to the blasting cabinet, stick these bits in, clean up the insides here, and take it from there. That's all the parts cleaned up then. Now we're ready for some new steel. So it might not look like it, but to me that's the hard work is done in a sense. All the rotten material has been cut out, disposed of, and this is what I've got to work with. This is the important bit, is this nice section here which I can use as a pattern to make them what is now the missing parts for the other sections. So on this side and rather like that one. Got here a cardboard box from last night's dinner. That is that, and it's also that. This is not precision engineering. That much should be obvious, but it doesn't need to be. Not at this point. So there are parts of the chassis reconstruction that I'm going to be very careful about getting lined up and getting dimensions as close as I can possibly manage them. I suspect a lot of the clever part of engineering is knowing when you have to be precise and when it's not so important. If you spend forever trying to get everything perfect, you never actually get anything done, and a lot of the time that perfect is not required. And of course sometimes it's very important. There's our first one then. Courtesy of Grandad, I have rather a nice panel beating hammer. This isn't quite panel work, it's not far off. So that curve there needs to come out first. I'd say that's taken out most of the distortion. It's coming that way a little bit. It's minimal then. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Okey-dokey. That's what I need to cut out then to start with. I got this big sheet of steel just after I acquired the Land Rover, and this is for doing up the chassis. And the nice thing is, I don't think I'm even going to need all of this sheet. Good. So that. Tiny curve. You might be able to make out there's an S to it now, very slightly. Yeah, that's almost there actually. Yeah, that's it. So I've got one corner locked in now. I'm looking across there because I want to make this piece here parallel with this piece. That's it. So now, slide that in there. Nice. The only trick with welding it up is, well, one is to get decent penetration on it so it goes right through, so that I don't have to weld the inside, because obviously I can't in most of it. But if I've got the settings right, it will pretty much fully penetrate, which is what we want. And the other thing is to spread the heat around. So if I just start in one corner and work my way around, it'll all distort. It shouldn't distort much because I've tacked it so much, but nonetheless it's best practice to spread the heat. So I just do short seams here and there. So the welding's never quite as neat when you do it like that, but there's no distortion. I think that's come out pretty well. This was the one that was most damaged. You can see that's blended in now. This isn't finished. This is just first going over. The one with the chassis number on it. That one goes there. And this one here. Shrink it a little bit. There's the more snug one. That one's correct. I'm not worried about distortion on this one because of the way it's all shaped. As long as the tacks are strong, it's going to be fine. Starting to look like dumbirons again, and considerably more solid than they were a few days ago. So these weld seams here will be left visible. I'm not going to blend those in because that's how they were, so that's fine. I've been careful to leave this is not supposed to be welded underneath, because that needs to be, that's a drain slot, and here I've put in 2 welds as per original, so again water can drain, so water can go down there and it can drain out the bottom of here and it can drain through there. What's left to do then is obviously make a square bit to cap off the end. Then I've got to sort out the holes for the bumper mounting bolts rather, which go through here, and on this one the holes are reasonable, and that's a bit oval but they're reasonable, but on this one you can see they're quite terrible. So yes, I need to sort out those holes and then drill right the way through and make holes in the bottom. So I've got one decent hole that's round. So that's a 1/2 inch hole basically. 13 would do then. This one's a bit trickier, but again I can see some of the outline of the original circular hole. So what I'll do is, on the holes that have enlarged themselves, I'm going to build it up with weld and then I'll file it back to the right size. So there you can see where I've built up around those holes. These were the two really bad ones. Now if I just get a 13mm drill bit and go through there, it's going to chatter around all over the place, because obviously that's not a round hole at the minute. So what I'm going to have to do is to file it back. And to do that I'm going to use a die grinder. These are little carbide burrs. It's basically a rotary file. So first I'm going to use the angle grinder and get back to the original surface level. Now then, I've got to drill all the way through, which of course, now I've got to get the whole thing under the pillar drill. The last thing I'm going to do before capping the ends off here is cut a drain slot. The original way the dumbirons were set up, they had a drain hole behind these bolt holes, but I'm going to make one in the front here. I think that's going to be better. That's all I've cut in there, just that notch really. This one's got a big gap. But I'm just going to pump metal in there until it's full. That's it, that's all the welding done. I am going to dress up the ends a bit. I think we're done. But that's a lot of work, but very satisfying to get to the result that I got to. And I know now that the entire front dumb iron is rock solid. Been over everything, and it's proper now. That's a nice feeling. And I'm quite confident with the dimensions as well, and the positioning of everything. I think it'll all be just right. And I think the important thing as well is that they're a pair, and I was very careful to make them a mirror image, one of the other. So I think that'll, yeah, it's going to work out fine. So I'm sure there's many people out there thinking that I completely wasted my time rebuilding the dumbirons instead of just buying a new set. But if you follow that to its logical conclusion, then, you know, why rebuild the chassis? Why restore the Land Rover? Why not just buy one? You know, so I think it's nice to be able to restore some of it where I can, where it's effective to do so. Like I said before, the outriggers, I just bought new ones because there was nothing left to work with on the old ones for the most part. It was a complicated shape to make completely from scratch, and if you're going to make it completely from scratch, it's not really restoration either. These were savable, so I saved them. Simple as that. And I actually enjoyed doing it. It's rare that I get to restore something for myself. Or, you know, it has been. Right, I think I've made an epic saga out of this. Hopefully I can hack it down into something actually watchable. Yes, well, that'll do for now. I'll see you next time. Cheers.